been good. Do you want coffee? I'm going to get it.
Oh, go ahead.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Good morning. Thank you for coming to our March general meeting. I am Sarah Vreda. I'm one of the PFA co-presidents, along with Jerry Moore. Jerry can't be with us this morning, so she asked me to get us started. But before we get to the main event, we have two items of business. The first item is to point out that we have career night next Wednesday, March 22nd at 6:45, and to ask you to please encourage your kids to come. Our team has been hard at work on this, and we have a really impressive roster of people coming in to talk to the kids. So please mention it to your kids and encourage them to come. And for our juniors, this will be the last opportunity that they have to attend career night. It's something we do every other year. And we haven't had it since 2019 because of COVID. So this is really the first year we're bringing it back, and it's going to be big. So we hope everyone will come. The second item of business is to approve the minutes from the January general meeting. So can I get a motion to approve the minutes? Stacy? Second? Meg? All in favor? Any opposed? Thank you. The minutes have been approved. We're very, very happy to have New Canaan Cares and two special guests here with us today for part two of a conversation on modern teen dating. And some of you might be wondering, part two, what happened to part one? So this time last year, New Canaan Cares and Emma Kate came in to kick off a conversation on teen dating. And it was probably one of the better attended PFA meetings we've had in a really long time. And it was clear that this is a topic parents have a lot of questions about. And trust me, if you don't have questions right now, give it a year or two and you will. So we definitely think there's value in continuing this conversation and in bringing in a legal perspective, which we did not have last year. And with that, I would like to ask Phil to come up and introduce our guests.
Well, thank you all for being here. As always, I'm always thrilled with the parent participation in anything that we do here. Last year we had, I guess, the parents' guide to the modern teen dating 1.0. And when they said 2.0 was coming, I blushed a little bit because some of the questions that came out of 1.0, I had to walk in and walk out. So, once we get started, if you don't see me stick around like I generally traditionally do, there's a reason that you guys can talk openly and honestly without your principal in the room. But as a parent of a 17-year-old girl, this is a topic that I think is important, and you guys should have a forum to be able to discuss. So I'm thrilled that CARES is able to bring this to us. So I want to thank Maureen Aziel. I'll introduce her to come on up in a second. And also Emma Kate and Jeff, who is our expert here. Emma Kate was here for years and is a great friend and resource to us here at the high school. And Jeff is an amazing community liaison, as all of you probably know from middle school as well as now here at the high school. So we're blessed to have him here. They're going to guide you through today, and I hope that you guys can have an open and honest conversation and enjoy the morning. So thank you. Maureen?
Thanks. Good morning, everyone. Nice to see you all. He's already introduced them, so I will make this quick. I'm the Education and Program Manager for New Canaan Cares, and I want to thank Principal Egan, Jerry, and Sarah for having us here today. We're so grateful for our partnership with the high school and the PFA. For those of you that are not familiar with CARES, we are a nonprofit community organization with the mission to advance the health and well-being of youth and families. We provide free, responsive educational programs that support and strengthen parenting skills, positive youth development, and healthy lifestyles. It's my pleasure to introduce Emma Kate. She was here last year, and as you heard, or some of you might remember how great it was, and everyone thought that we should do it again. She is a licensed professional counselor and specializes in working with adolescents, young adults, and their families. She earned an undergraduate degree in psychology and family studies from Miami University and has a master's in clinical mental health counseling from Fairfield University. She manages the outpatient department of Silver Hill Hospital, where she provides trauma treatment for patients and has a small private practice. Prior to working for Silver Hill Hospital, Emma Kate has worked here as the teen talk counselor. And we all know and appreciate Officer Deek, middle school SRO, now the high school SRO. And he actually spoke at a talk earlier we had this year, and I'm going to do a little commercial that maybe you guys could check it out. It was on vaping, teen vaping. CARES did it, and it's very informative, and I think you would learn some things through it. So it's on our YouTube page. Finally, you noticed a pencil and an index card in your seat when you came in. That is for if you have any questions, and I'll collect it in the back as we get towards the end of it, just because we want to try and get through as many questions as we can and try to get to 10:30. So thank you very much. Enjoy.
Go up so I can see my slides.
Good morning. I'm Emma Kate. Nice to meet you all. How are we doing? Good. Okay, so let me just set expectations a little bit about what Jeff and I are going to cover. I know we have limited time, and I'd really like us to have more time for questions and conversations, so I will try to move through my materials quickly. So what we will try to cover today, I know there's no shortage of programming in town around like adolescent brain development, so I'll touch on it as it relates to what we're talking about with adolescent social and romantic relationships, but I'll try not to harp on it too much, although it is one of those topics I could talk about for 15 minutes without taking a breath, so I will try to be concise though. We'll talk about some current trends in dating, what we're seeing. I'd like for us to have some time to talk about how do you talk to your kids about some of these challenging topics. We're giving you information to hopefully feel more informed and empowered to have these conversations, and having tools is helpful. And then being more informed around sexting, sextortion in particular. That was something that came up last year, and thankfully we have Jeff here this year to help answer some of those questions more specifically. I just want to let you all know off the top, I will be speaking very generally around what I see around adolescent brain development, psychosocial expectations. Of course, filter that into what this looks like for your child. I also noticed when I was going through my slides last night, again, that I used a lot of very heteronormative terms. Not every adolescent relationship is heterosexual, and not every child identifies as cisgender, so I apologize in advance. I'm not sure I used very inclusive language. Okay. All right, so where are we right now with adolescents? Adolescent 12 to 18, 19, so starting in middle school. As we all remember fondly from our kids' middle school years, this is when they become way more socially aware and a little competitive, and we're really, really preoccupied with being accepted by a friend group, right? Being liked, feeling connected. They're at this stage now of what we call identity versus role confusion, which basically just means identity formation. It's like their first identity crisis. Baby's first identity crisis. Their brains aren't fully developed yet, which again, I know a lot of us are aware of. What we're basically talking about here is their prefrontal cortex isn't fully developed. It's not fully operational. We do not have that as an online full-time resource. Who knows what prefrontal cortex does? What does this part of your brain do for us? Mm-hmm. Decision making, what else? Judgment, what else? Mm-hmm. Emotion regulation. So decision making, making good judgments, regulating my emotions, all things that would be really great to have in high school. And yet, and it's not to say that they don't have these skills, they just aren't as honed as they are in adulthood. They haven't had opportunities to really develop a lot of these skills yet, and it's not built in the way it is for us as we get older. So this means that there's an intensity in emotions, and there isn't a built-in safeguard for how do I regulate myself quickly, or how do I get myself back to baseline, right? So at the time in their lives where they're experiencing probably the most intense emotions they ever will, there isn't like a firewall to be like, hey, cool it. They need to learn skills to be able to regulate emotions effectively, and they need support from us in helping them do that. We'll also notice an increase in impulsivity and reactivity. A lot of this comes from emotions being very intensely felt, and they're working on developing their own identities. At this age and stage, we expect exploration of themselves, which does require some risk-taking. We want them to experience natural consequences so that they can develop some of these skills, and we want to support them as they move through this stage because sometimes things can be painful. So a little more detail, sorry for the very wordy slide. We can anticipate an increase in the intensity of emotions and the importance of feeling socially connected, right? So like I said, most kids do not have the skills to manage discomfort, to manage stress, to manage feeling uncomfortable very effectively. And the way that comes out, the behaviors that we see are often, those problem behaviors that we associate with adolescence, right? The isolating, slamming doors, I'm on my phone all the time. I go from having, no emotional output to exploding, as uncomfortable as a lot of it is. I think a lot of us have probably encountered some of that. We're nodding, yes. So it's to be expected, it's normal, and it's uncomfortable. I think being able to anticipate it is helpful. Dating relationships are another way to feel loved and accepted, which again is kind of the top of the hierarchy at this age and stage. So we know and we see how they prioritize their friends, right? And they're really, really good at being good friends a lot of the times. They like to be in touch with each other. They like to support each other. They want to be there. They want to be that person. And dating relationships are just another way to expand on that, right? And dating relationships are a developmentally appropriate thing. They're going to start to explore relationships. Who am I in a relationship? What do I like in a partner? That sort of thing. This is where they practice and figure out, what does a relationship look like for me? They're laying that groundwork for adult relationships. The increase in impulsivity and reactivity. So again, a lot of this comes from them not being able to manage emotions very well. So the behaviors we see are often impulsive responses to a strong emotion. And they aren't great at measuring risk, at making adult decisions because they're not adults and they don't have great insight yet. So a lot of those risky, impulsive decisions that we see as like, what was that? That was a choice. They don't see it that way because they did think about it for 0.5 seconds. It doesn't mean that we give kids a free pass, right? And say, oh, well, you're supposed to be impulsive and risky at this stage. It's more like we just need to expect it and be able to try to have conversations around boundaries, limits, what are the expectations in this household, so that when they do inevitably push that boundary, cross that line, we're able to meet them with a natural consequence and remind them, we did talk about this. I think that comes up a lot in relationships too, because I know sometimes there are households that have rules around when can you start dating, what is your curfew, when are you able to go out on a date on your own versus with friends or with me in the same restaurant or movie theater as you. The earlier and more often we can have those conversations, the less conflict we tend to have because there just aren't very many surprises. And then they're working on developing their own identities. So this is where I'm trying to determine who am I independent of my family, of my friends, of my town, what makes me me and my own unique individual. So this is, I actually had this come up with a client the other day. This is my kid and I used to love watching this movie together. It was our favorite movie. And it's my favorite movie because it's your favorite movie, Dad. And now all of a sudden they don't want to watch this movie with me. They actually don't like it. And all they want to watch are the Fast Five series. And this is part of that, right? These little benign examples of I don't like that movie anymore. And all of a sudden I don't like theater anymore. And I need to try on a different hat. I need to do something else. Kids tend to look at things in very black and white, all or nothing terms, again, because they don't have a whole lot of tolerance for that middle ground. So this is where that kind of ham-fisted, clunky formation of identity comes in. They just don't have the skills for nuance. So, for example, they've been involved in theater or football, their whole lives, they've always loved it. It's kind of hard for them to phase out if they start to notice that they're not liking it so much anymore, or they want to explore something else, right? This is all of a sudden I hate theater, not I think I want to try something else. I think I want to go to another club and see how I like this. I can do both at the same time. No, that is not in the realm of possibility. We have to guide them there. So lots of the black and white thinking. And then, like I said, they just don't have great emotion regulation and distress tolerance skills. Even our most mature kids, like they just aren't going to have the same level of skill as we do. So how can I help in this stage? We want to validate. Validating does not mean we agree. Validating just means I'm going to try to meet you where you are and acknowledge that you're having an emotion, right? If you're ever struggling with, I want my kid to feel supported, but I really, really don't agree with what they're doing right now, I tend to go to the emotion, because we can always validate that. We can point out, you seem really upset right now, right? Or you seem really uncomfortable. We're not going to validate the behavior that comes with it often, right? But we can get to the emotion, and that's often our in to be able to talk to them and support them. I also encourage parents to steal this phrase I use a lot. Do you want to be heard, or do you want to be helped? How many of you have ever heard from your kid, I don't want you to solve my problem for me, I just want you to listen? Right? And it's like, okay, but you're bringing me a problem, so I would like to problem solve with you. It kind of goes against what we've done up to this stage. Often just asking them, like, do you want to be heard? Do you want to be supported? Or do you want me to kind of help you more in a more hands-on way, can help reduce conflict and keep everybody happy with what do we need to be doing from here. We don't want to help them avoid consequences, though, especially in a social and relational setting. So when our kids have a fight with friends, which who's encountered that so far? Having a fight with friends or a falling out? Almost all of us. Okay. It's super uncomfortable, right? It's hard to watch kids be sad and mad and feel rejected. It's awful. And sometimes we need to let them sit with, okay, what was my role in this? Did I have a role in it, right? If I didn't, how can I advocate for myself, right? If I didn't have a role in being kind of cut from this friend group, what does that tell me about what I'd like to seek out with new friends moving forward? Or if I did something wrong, if I hurt a friend, if I hurt a boyfriend, how do I need to take ownership of that and make a repair and apologize, right? And if we, call the other parents, right? Or if we try to have a meeting with all the kids together, as much as it might be helpful in the moment and it's sparing their feelings, helping them feel more comfortable, supported, it's also sort of robbing them of an opportunity to problem solve on their own and figure out, like, what skills do I need to get out of this, right? The way that they develop these skills that they're lacking, like I was talking about, is actually by making mistakes and having to solve them, right? And then we want to have clear, consistent rules, boundaries, expectations. We want to discuss them early and often. We don't want surprises on either end. And as they're getting older, of course, those rules and expectations are going to change a little bit. So I think about the expectations of a 14-year-old versus the expectations of a 17-year-old who can drive now, right? Those rules need to shift a little bit. And the nice thing is, as they're getting a little older and they're developing a little bit more of an identity and they're able to identify, at least a little bit better, what their priorities are, the conversation can be a little bit more collaborative. So you can talk to them about, hey, this is what seems fair to me. What am I missing? Or this is a hard line for me. I really can't negotiate on it here, and I need you to understand why. Right? They're old enough now where they actually tend to appreciate reasoning for things. It doesn't mean that they're not going to argue with you on it, but again, it tends to be helpful in them developing these skills and learning how to advocate for themselves, right? If I don't agree with a rule, a boundary, a curfew, how can I talk to my parent about it in a way where they're more likely to actually listen and at least have a conversation with me, right? As opposed to the foot stomping, my friends get to stay out till midnight, you're too strict. Right. We want to communicate, demonstrate that kids aren't going to get in trouble for coming to us with a problem if they're having trouble with a friendship, in a relationship, or if they're not feeling safe in a relationship, right? I imagine our shared hope is that kids would come to us with this, right, and let us know that they need help or just that something's not feeling right. So the earlier and more often we can communicate, you're not going to get in trouble if you come to me with a concern. Right, I think is incredibly important. Again, it doesn't mean that there aren't consequences for actions, but we don't want them to be too preoccupied with the I'm going to get in trouble and not come to us when there's something going on. Practicing validation is challenging for a lot of folks, and a lot of parents I work with have shared with me that it's hard for them to use this skill because it wasn't demonstrated for them in their lives, in their households. Right? I won't ask for show of hands, but I know a lot of us grew up in households where emotions were not very welcome, right? Or there were certain ones that were okay to show, but don't you dare slam that door, right? Or, we're not going to have expressions of anger. You're not allowed to be sad here. You have it so good here, right? When we grow up with that messaging, it's hard then as parents to be validating for kids because we didn't really have that modeled for us. And that's okay. That doesn't mean that you can't do it. It's just like we're talking about with the kids, it's a skill that I need to practice and develop and feel comfortable with. So if you're noticing that you're having a hard time with this, and maybe it's frustrating because I want to be there for my kid, or I want to be able to practice this, that's where I think people like me can be a helpful person in your life. It doesn't have to be ongoing therapy, but I work with lots of parents in like consultation with, hey, let's have a practice boot camp of, all right, for the next 6 weeks, we're going to practice having tough conversations, or we're going to work on communication validation skills. It's a very accessible thing, especially in this community. And then educating yourself like you are today. It's a lot easier to have these tough conversations when we feel informed and empowered and feel like we know at least something that's going on with our kids. All right, we covered this last year. I'm just going to do a quick overview, if that's okay. What dating looks like now. So, hybrid of what we experienced in high school, like asking people out, going to the movies with friends, going to the movies with just the person I asked out on a date, right? The thing that's a little bit different is the courtship leading up to actually dating someone in real life is a little longer, and it's mostly happening virtually, right? So think Snapchat, Instagram, TikTok especially now, Discord a little bit, texting not so much. Texting, like that tends to happen more when kids are actually officially dating. I don't know why. They're still doing all of these social things that we all did. It's just how they're getting there that's different. Another one of you mentioned to me, and I didn't put it on here, so thank you for mentioning it to me. Dating apps, they are using those in high school, like Tinder. I know they're using it because I have kids that go here. Not my kids I see in therapy. They tend to remain online for a while, these relationships. There's like the hurdle where for us it was more like making it official is taking it offline, right? There's a whole lot more involved with having a face-to-face conversation with somebody than there is having a text exchange. There's more thought that can go into what I'm saying. I can be more charming. I can be more witty when I have time to formulate what I'm going to say and text it, or, well, not text it, Snapchat it, right? Coming in person and moving those relationships offline is sometimes where the relationships fizzle out because it's more awkward in person. And again, they don't have a whole lot of skills for holding the awkward, right? Awkward is really distressing for them. So what are they going to do? Avoid. Right? So that's why you'll hear them talking about like, oh, I'm talking to a bunch of people, but they're not actual dating relationships yet. In this community in particular, there does tend to be a draw to dating people from other schools because a lot of the kids have grown up together and don't have an interest in dating someone who feels like a sibling. Like I said, most things happen online. What have I not talked about yet? We see the shift when kids can drive themselves to more one-on-one time. Prior to that, there still tend to be more like social group hangs or like seeing your significant other or the person you're interested in like at a party versus a one-on-one dating. Hookup culture, in talking to my kids last year before I did the 1.0, before I knew it was 1.0, I polled, about 80 of my kids about hookup culture, like what should parents know? And the resounding info I got from them was people hook up, but it's not like in college. Like Euphoria is not a great representation of what we're doing. They said college is more where you're seeing people hooking up. Like high school, they tend to just be hooking up with a partner or with someone that they're courting or starting to date. The random hookup thing isn't happening so much. They said that's more like my older siblings doing that at college. But it does happen. And what, again, we're seeing more prevalent than physical hooking up is sexting. So sending pictures to each other. And that tends to happen before the dating relationship is even established. That's like part of the courting now. Again, it takes longer. It takes a while for things to be more like official in the way that we're used to it. But that doesn't mean that they're not making connections with people prior to that. So I just teed us up.
You sure did.
Want to switch?
Sure.
It's like I planned it.
What did GNOC mean?
Oh, sorry, GNOC. GNOC is get naked on camera. I'll leave you with that.
I'm gonna let that sit in for a minute.
I had a glossary of terms last year.
So, before I talk about this incredibly interesting topic, most of you I know, some of you I don't know, I just wanted to thank you guys. And the reason I wanted to thank you is I've been in law enforcement for 28 years, and the last 8 years have been the best part of my career. It's because of your kids. So thank you for letting me work with them, and thank you for trusting in me. So with that being said, let's talk about this wonderful topic of sexting. Does everybody know what sexting is? Okay, because it's been around for only 12 years. Because before sexting, it was called child pornography. And then the legislators, and let's give you a little history, the legislators in Connecticut were being so overwhelmed by prosecutors because this was going on so often that they were like, we're going to have to change this. We can't keep on charging these kids with felonies because they're exchanging photographs. So they changed it to sexting. So we'll get into the actual definition of sexting. Sexting is the sharing and receiving of sexually explicit messages and nude or partially nude images via cell phone. Sex can be sent as a regular text message through apps like, said a few of those, Snapchat, Instagram, WhatsApp, Discord, TikTok, and even online gaming. So while some of you parents go, I got my finger on the pulse, I'm here to tell you, I don't think necessarily you do. And that's not a criticism at all. As a father of 3, I thought I did too, and I was sadly mistaken. So we're gonna work together through this all. So here's what the state of Connecticut came up with in terms of sexting. They changed the law, like I said, right? So it addresses certain age parameters. But what they weren't banking on was the fact that, so if you were 13 years old and you sent an inappropriate picture to your 17-year-old boyfriend, right, it was a misdemeanor, right, if that image got sent out, or if it wasn't unwanted, or if it was unwanted. But House Bill 602 says, well, hold on a minute. What if a 12-year-old sends that out? They're going to be charged with child pornography, or they receive it? So they said, well, we have to put the brakes on this, and we have to change that law. So sadly, it's going on often. And as you guys know, I worked at Sachs Middle School, and it was going on. It was pretty widespread, right? I think mostly because they're young kids with the world at their fingertips, and there's no emotion when you send something, and it's really, really easy to do. And for some of these kids that don't necessarily feel comfortable with their bodies yet, it sure is nice to have, when you make a relationship with somebody that tells you all those wonderful things that you'd never hear, like, oh my God, you're so gorgeous and you're beautiful and you're in such good shape. And that's how this relationship happens, and then they start sending out these pictures to each other. So I covered this. This was in that bill. So I'll let you guys all read that, what child pornography says. Under the age of 16, electronic communication device. We all know what that is, because I know there's going to be some questions about this stuff. So there's 3 forms of sexting, right? Sexting can happen through 3 ways. Sexually explicit text messages, provocative audio clips, and you're thinking, what is that? Well, they're out there. Suggestive selfies or videos. So no matter what form of sexting takes, it should always be consensual. However, depending on the age difference, that's when we get involved. For instance, a college-age student decides to exchange images with a 13-year-old, right? That would be child pornography. What should you do? So there's some controversy about this. Some people say, well, even if you receive it, that's against the law. Well, I'll ask you guys, have anybody sent you something that you wish you didn't get, that you didn't ask for? So some of the things that I have to, walk parents through, along with prosecutors and state's attorneys, they're like, well, listen, if they receive something, maybe they should tell somebody. Is that reality, though? Is your 15-year-old son going to come up to you and say, Mom, Johnny sent me this video. What should I do? Right? But what we should do is have that conversation. Listen to me. Delete it and don't send it out. So these are just some of the things that you should do, right? So you get a video or a picture of somebody, delete it. Delete it. If there's an investigation and says, well, hold on a minute, we found out that your son did receive that video or text message, so he's in violation. You say, well, we deleted it. And most state's attorney will say, well, we support that excuse. And then the other thing that is really hard for some of these kids, right, because you receive this text message or this picture of your friend, and you're like, well, what do I want to do with this? I want to share it. I want to show all my buds in the football locker room or lacrosse field and go, dude, look at Mary, right? She looks great. So that's the hard part for our kids to deal with, and it's widespread, very widespread. So I'll let you guys know some of the things that we're seeing when it comes to questions and answers during this time, but please don't feel uncomfortable asking these hard questions, because it's really important that you guide your children through this part so that they don't make that mistake, so they're not part of making a video and sending it out widespread, because we will get involved, sadly.
So let's see. I'll come up, stand with you. All right. So before we jump into what, straight from the mouths of the babes, what they want you all to know, what questions do you all have about this? This might be a good stopping point for us to see where we want the rest of the conversation to go. Go ahead.
I've got lots of questions, but
Yeah.
I'll start with a G-rated one. What impact did pandemic lockdown have on social development and dating?
Yeah, the pandemic definitely shifted the way that kids communicate. They were already communicating primarily online, and the pandemic, of course, made that more of a necessity. I think that it has stunted their social skill development a little bit. Not to say that they can't make up for it and that they can't learn these skills. They're just happening later than they would have. Like that sort of natural progression that we've been used to up until 2020 was stunted. So I think now more than ever, it's important to help them develop some of these social skills, because they just aren't as baked in as they were previously. They weren't in person at school. They weren't having the in-person interactions to kind of balance out what was happening online. So, but yes, great question. There was not a great impact.
I would say huge.
Yeah.
I would say huge. And communities, and so there's two different communities that I know that I've said before. That's the one I work in and the one I live in. Two very different ones. And it has impacted the mental health of all of our kids hugely.
Yeah, before I was managing the outpatient department at Silver Hill, I facilitated the adolescent IOP program. We were very busy during the pandemic and have continued to be very busy. The impact that it had on kids' mental health was huge. It was isolating for a lot of kids, and now going back into school not having those skills is really challenging. And again, they don't have the bandwidth to manage a lot of these uncomfortable emotions. So I will say, from a Silver Hill standpoint and a private practice standpoint, I've remained very busy, because there seems to still just be a lot of need, pandemic related or not. Anything else?
Well, in a follow-up to that, do you think that the kids are not dating? It's like they're just not engaging with other kids in the same way, or they're going too far because they're overcompensating? Like, what's the?
During the pandemic, there might have been some overcompensating, but I haven't seen it have a big impact on whether kids are or are not dating now. Have you seen anything like that?
No, not really.
It doesn't seem to be changing like a
In
trend.
the town that I live in, Stratford, a little different. But here, you guys were in school learning.
Mm-hmm.
So I think you guys are markedly higher
Yeah.
than other communities. So in my community, yeah, we're definitely struggling.
I think you had a hand up? Oh, sorry. Oh, good, we have multiple hands.
I was just wondering about access to your child's home versus privacy. That I struggle with.
Yeah, struggle is a good word. It's hard to know what is the right thing to do. How closely should I monitor what my kids are doing online or what they're talking to their friends about versus how much privacy should they have as emerging adults. It's so weird to think of them that way, but that's what they are. It's going to depend, I'm going to give you the really annoying answer, it's going to depend on their age and on the kid. What have you noticed of them on this spectrum of good versus poor decision making for what we can expect from them at this age and stage, right? And, you know, have you had a conversation with them about it? Do they know that you are monitoring their activity? Do they know what that is? Are they informed so that they can show you that they're making good, appropriate decisions? When does it stop? Is there a point at which you won't monitor? Like it should be like an ongoing conversation. There are a number of apps that a lot of parents I work with like to use. I know Life 360 is one of them, so you can minimally see where your kids are. I like that. A lot of the parents I work with like it because they feel like they don't have to be as on top of the kids and what they're doing. If I know where you are and you are where you say you are, that helps me maintain and build trust, right? Especially if there's been situations where kids have lied about where they are, who they're with. Giving them tools to both put some guardrails up and give them an opportunity to do better, be more skillful, make better decisions, like that's the sweet spot.
I appreciate what you're saying, that it's now more normative for kids to meet one another, meet peers for dating through Instagram and Snapchat and all that. But the tricky part for me is that there are so many predators on those social media apps as well. And I remember I use Bark for my 14-year-old, and I remember watching a Bark video of an adult who dressed up first as like a 16-year-old.
I saw the same video.
And then as a 14-year-old, and within minutes of setting up a new Instagram account, this 14-year-old child was getting, horrible sexual messages from adult men.
Right.
So I don't know, it's just so hard to distinguish like what's healthy and appropriate and what is dangerous.
100%.
And go ahead. No, go ahead.
I think the other thing that happens related to, I saw the same video, I almost included it in this presentation so there's kids who get unwanted, unsolicited messages from adults, especially if they don't have a private account. And there's kids who they think they know, or people posing as kids, that they develop these relationships with, or just kids who aren't respectful of boundaries, right, and ask for things that aren't appropriate. Or so there is like that whole wide spectrum too. Do you want to talk a little bit about sextortion? And
Sure.
Because I think that's
so
a good.
Some of the things
yeah.
that we're seeing, and I saw it at Saxon, I'm certainly seeing it at the high school quite a bit, is you befriend somebody on any one of these platforms, right? These young kids, and they're having these conversations with that person, thinking that they're a different person, right? And so,
It's not a real person that they know.
And I'll give you an example. This young student befriended someone, and he sent some photos out from Instagram. Said, "Great, send me this," and they developed a relationship. Well, the other person on the other side said, "Well, now I have all your followers, so if you don't, and I'm going to post these pictures out to all your followers unless you give me some money." And so oftentimes, kids are sending money via Venmo or whatever to these accounts. And I'm not going to say it's really widespread, but it's going on quite a bit. And that's somewhat shocking for us, because for us, it's really hard. A lot of these social media platforms are not law enforcement friendly. And you go, really? In fact, they're not good at all. They'll give us zero information without search warrants. And that's really hard for us, because by that time, your kid's in crisis, and we have to wait sometimes weeks before we get this information. We don't know if they're continuing to talk with these predators in the meantime. So it's very difficult for us, yeah.
When you say this type of social media, can you give an example of what it is? Like, is it Snapchat or Instagram?
Yes.
All of those things?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, it's TikTok,
Like, I
it's
delete it all.
Discord. How many people are familiar with Discord?
Oh, good.
Yeah, so a couple years ago, people were like, "I know everything my kids do," and I go, "Do you know about Discord?" They're like, "What's that?" I go, "It's another platform where you can communicate, right?" And the hard part about Snapchat is, what do we all know about Snapchat? It disappears, right? And that's really hard for us. Unless, of course, people take screenshots. Yes?
With Snapchat,
and see it, even law enforcement after the fact?
Sometimes, yeah. Sometimes.
To ask for it.
No, I mean, even ex parte, sometimes Snapchat doesn't give it to us.
They can take screenshots on Snapchat, though.
Yeah, but then that screenshot notifies the person who took the picture, and then there's another internal conflict.
As a parent, can you give suggestions on how to talk to our kids about? I mean, to me, it seems very obvious predators, and we've all, we've all seen TV shows and Dateline and all this crazy stuff. And I think my 17-year-old is super bright and mature and on top of things, and then I'll talk to her and she'll be like, "You're crazy. You actually think that this person isn't who they say they are?" And I'm like, "Well, you have to at least question it." And she thinks I'm being over protective. So, yeah.
Can I ask that question just so that you don't have to, and then how to talk through that, and then how to deal with the fact that they may be a real person that they met who goes to Fairfield Prep, and then how do you allow that relationship to develop, because you don't want to shut out. It's like such a fine line, right?
Right.
Yeah. Thank you, Crash.
Sure.
Yes, so and that is a perfect example. It's sort of what I had in mind with this presentation is like a lot of us know our kids as like bright, reasonable. Like most of the time we can get there with them, and then they have this blind spot. And it is part of them not having good insight. They do not have the capability to look at things the way that we do and acknowledge like I'm actually not special and exempt from risk. Right? Kids are really good at thinking they are. That's part of what helps them take risks. It's part of what helps them be vulnerable and try on different hats and like look through different opportunities to form their identities. The problem is, like I said, it can be really ham-fisted because there's very little middle ground, right? They don't see themselves in this pool, even though they are in the pool of people who can be targeted for these things. And I've had the same conversations with kids where I don't like to wave the like expert flag, but I've been like, I might know what I'm talking about, just a little bit. And you don't. I've when I used to go to the health classes, the number of times I was told I was fear-mongering because I was talking about fentanyl, for example, I can't count, right? And we all know it's super real. The risk is so real. We're just trying to give you the information. At a certain point, they can't get there. So that's where I tend to try to reframe it as like, what do you think the risk is, right? Like put it on them a little bit. How do you think this relates to you? If you don't think it relates to you, if you are somehow exempt and special, which is wonderful, why? What makes you different, right? And if it's, well, I'm smarter, I make my Instagram private so only people I know can contact me. Okay, only people you know. So you've never let like a restaurant follow you because that's cool to have a restaurant you like follow you on Instagram, right? Or you've never let a guy who you think you know through this person follow you because they're hot, right? Or I think I met this person at a football game. I think they go to prep. They're safe. I'll let them, right? Like start poking the holes. The more they can come to their own conclusion about it, even if it's not the exact same as ours, the better, because there's less resistance and there's less pushing away. It requires a lot of patience, a lot of flexibility, where it's not necessarily about being right, it's about being effective. Right? Like, what do I want them to know, and how are we going to get there? Because you guys are totally correct. At a certain point, they're not going to hear what we're saying. They need to make that realization themselves. So having the communication tools to have that collaborative, ongoing, probably, conversation. Did that help answer the question?
And the truth is, kids are going to make mistakes.
Right.
That's a given. Listen, parenting, being a good parent, is hard, and sometimes it sucks. It's the hardest job in the world, right? To be a good parent, to be a crappy parent and not care and not sit here and go,
Yeah.
it's easy. My kids are great.
Be passive.
I would disagree.
And to I've just realized I didn't answer your question about, what if they're dating someone who's not very local, or they're not someone that like I'm friends with their family or something like that, and what guidelines, parameters should I have up? I think for me, what I'll often advise parents on is we really want to try to have conversations about dating before they're dating. It's easier to have the conversation that way than it is to try to like correct as we go. And there's, like Jeff said, there's going to be mistakes. We're going to figure out like, okay, this expectation, this rule actually doesn't work in practice, right? Or, oh, this is more lax than I realized. Like that's all okay. There's no there's no rule that says your rules have to be hard, fast, and never change, right? And I think what I would ask of my child would be, I want to be able to trust you and let you develop this relationship, and I need to be involved in some way, right? I need to know what you guys are doing. I need you to be truthful about where you're going, like the basics. And I also want us to have an open dialogue about, like, if one of us ever has concerns, right? Like I said before, the number of kids who have worked within families where there was something going on and kiddo didn't feel comfortable coming to parent because they thought they were going to be in trouble. It's frustrating because parents and I are on the same page of like, oh, this was so avoidable. If only you had let me know. And they didn't, because they didn't feel comfortable. So I think having that ongoing conversation is really important. That's a really good question. I saw more hands and then I didn't. Yes.
How do these things eventually become revealed if your child isn't a sharer? So I recently found out something, or at the beginning of the school year, that surprised me. That was happening in this area, and for my 9th grader, and it came through a friend. And
Right.
without this person mentioning it, I would have been totally, my children don't share. They don't want my take on anything. We're not in
What do we
therapy,
know?
which we should be, all of us. So I'll be talking to you after. They don't want to hear it from me. So does it get to the crisis point, and then
I
also
think
Deke is involved? Like, where?
Sometimes, sometimes, in Saks or even the high school, kids go, well, how do you know? I go, how do you
You're not
think
as
I
slick
know
as
that
you think
somebody
you
took
are.
a picture? A parent sent it to me, or another kid sent it to someone else, and it's all over the place.
Yeah.
What do you think, I'm on your social media, in my office?
that's what he does all day.
A lot of them think I do. I let them believe it.
Yeah.
Totally.
That's what we do.
I'm on all your guys' stuff.
But yeah, I think what I see a lot when I'm getting involved on that level of like, okay, let's get parents involved, it's often friends are concerned and they're the ones being more reasonable around like, oh, this is really risky, I don't like this. Or it's come to a crisis point of, the sextortion example, like I'm needing to send someone money, or they're asking for more pictures, they're threatening to do this thing. When it gets to that point of, oh, I don't feel like I can handle this anymore on my own, and they're seeking help, which on the one hand is a good thing. That's what we want them to do. We want them to come to us when there's something going on. And of course, it's hard not to have that kind of judgmental thought of like, where were you earlier? We could have done something earlier.
I mean, even when I tried to talk to my child about it, gently,
Yeah.
there was denial. I got the very first layer of information, and I knew much more than when I revealed what I knew. They were open a little more, but only up to what I knew.
Right.
I mean, it wasn't a big crisis. It was just, it was my first entry into this type of stuff where I was like, really? We just started freshman year.
You got to keep on working and be patient. It's hard.
I called the counselor here, but I felt it didn't feel good.
Right. And it might not, right? Like it's uncomfortable to learn that our kids are doing things that like we didn't know about, even if it's not anything inappropriate or unsavory or unsafe. It's just them becoming little adults is sometimes just scary in and of itself. And it's hard to sit with that discomfort anyway of like, I'm not going to know everything about what my kid is doing. And it sounds like you handled it really beautifully by.
I don't know about that.
I'll give you credit.
Still, I just know my children in particular just don't want to tell me things.
Right.
They don't come to me. And so who are they going to? Like, where?
Friends.
I have that kind of respect.
Friends are the most important people to these
Yeah.
kids right now in their life. And they're willing to lie for their friends. They're willing to take the heat for their friends. And you go, why?
Yeah.
It's just this phenomenon that happens with kids at this age.
At
Don't get
this
me wrong,
age.
there's lots of wonderful kids that probably tell their parents everything. They probably tell them before they get in trouble. Well, I did a really bad thing.
Just telling you now.
Yeah, but I think for me personally, and it sounds like from you, we want to be a little bit better than our parents, right? I wanted to share a little bit better and talk to my kids about all this stuff. And when you find out they lied to you, you're like, oh, why would you lie to me? I told you didn't have to lie to me. We could have talked about this. And then they lie to you again.
Right.
But I know,
Yeah.
you lied to me. I know you.
Yeah.
And it's hard.
It's hard.
It's hard.
I don't hold a lot of consequence over their head. I'm just, come talk to me, I feel like I'm easy, but that's the problem is even though I'm really open and I can hear anything they want to say, I've had conversations ahead of time with them over things that they're like, oh my God, stop, it's gross. They still don't seek me out. So, you know, I'm hoping, I'm sure they're not coming to your office. That was another question. Like, do kids here sometimes feel like you're a better option too?
100%.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
I was just telling a story the other day because they had that tri-state come in, that group of people that see how we're doing mental health. Last week alone, I had a bunch of kids like, you know, I saw an accident. There's the cars involved. This girl that left. Other girl said, listen, I'm receiving these text messages. Can you walk me through? And I'm like, sure. Yeah. One girl said, I want you to know what you want to know about fentanyl. I'm like, yeah, perfect.
And they're pretty good. I'm consistently impressed with the kids seeking out adults who are appropriate to help them with things. I know Officer Deke is a big resource for the kids, the teen talk counselor, even the school counselors. They tend to be pretty good. If they're not approaching on their own, their friends are sometimes the ones with the better insight to say like, hey, I'm really concerned about what's going on with this person. When I was the teen talk counselor, that was probably about half my day, was people coming in with concern for a friend and how are we managing this together, which is pretty impressive. I think too, you bring up a good point. Who can relate to that? We're like, I think I make myself very approachable and yet, right, okay, perfect. So some of it, I don't like the way this will sound, but I think you'll get where I'm going. We have to try not to personalize our kids making mistakes and doing the thing that we're trying so hard to shield them from, because this again is kind of par for the course. It doesn't mean that you are doing something wrong or that you're not accessible enough, especially if they're telling you, like, I do feel like I can come to you and I didn't on this thing, right? This, again, is part of them trying to problem solve on their own, be their own independent person. Like, they all think that they're smarter than us. Some of them are. They all think that they are more adult than they are. They want to try to handle things on their own. So even if they know that I can go to mom with this, they're still going to try to problem solve on their own 99% of the time. Both things can be true, right? It doesn't mean that you're doing a bang up job. Like this is them trying to navigate things on their own. I do think it is important, to your point though, to have that follow up on, you know, I kind of hoped that if something like this was going on, you and I could talk about it together. Like, was there a barrier here? What happened? Right? Having that follow up conversation.
But no, it does work eventually. Like I would say my daughter in high school was not telling me everything, but now in college, oh, I hear everything.
Yes.
So, and they're bigger stakes. So keep working at it, because eventually it will pay off and they will realize they can call you when they have the problem at college, which is, you want them to call you when they have the problem at college.
Yes.
Yeah.
You know,
Because here it's like a nice little
Right.
bubble and all the counselors
little
love
steps.
you
There's
and
more
Officer
support.
Deke's gonna help you, but when they're not home, so I'm just saying, if you keep plugging away, it'll get better.
That's a really good point. Like, we're laying the foundation now for when they have fewer supports.
It's like real.
Yeah.
And the other part to that is when they do make those mistakes, and sometimes they're big, like they stay out all night and you find out that they stayed all night, there needs to be some follow-up consequences, not like, so you stayed out all night,
Right.
why?
What?
Well, we know why. And now
happens?
as a result of you staying out,
Right.
we have consequences, not because we're mad at you,
Right.
because we're disappointed and we still love you.
Right.
But, no.
Yeah, and at that point, we hopefully will have already had a conversation with them about, like, your curfew is your curfew. You stayed out till 4. I want to know why that happened, and also, here's the consequence we already talked about, right? Again, both can be true. We're going to have boundaries. We're going to be really clear on our expectations. We're going to try to have conversations about when those boundaries get pushed, because they will. Their job right now is to boundary push. They need to test us. It's like, I don't know. It's really cruel, but they do it. So we need to be ready for that.
I was just thinking, what I tend to want to tell them about, oh, I did this when I was your age. You know, when they're younger, but as they get older, and I have one in college now, I'm telling them a little bit more when I wasn't so great. And I'm always wondering, so, hey, I feel like I can get very feel like sharks. And I'm like, when is it okay to cut it so they can say, it's all right, we're human, I did this. And
Like, you can come back
also
from
say,
this.
how much did you tell me?
I like to quote our principal. He would go, too much. Too much.
I will share this one story.
There we go. Come back.
So for me, like when I was telling one of our assistant principals always jokes, because my daughter but I've shared some stories of myself as a child, not all of them. And she literally, one day, she was like, well, that's a cautionary tale. So she viewed me as a cautionary tale, which I hope is a good thing. And honestly, she doesn't know all the stories. So, you know, but allow yourself and laugh so hard because, yeah, you know, but in a way, if it gives her some boundaries around certain things, that's a good thing, you know. I hope so.
Well, and to your point, what you share is largely dependent on how old they are, can they handle it, and why am I sharing it, right? Am I sharing to help them problem solve? Am I sharing to help relieve them because they made a mistake and oh my gosh, I made that mistake too. Let me reassure you that you can come back from this. Am I sharing because I want to feel closer to them? That might be where I say, don't do that, right? We don't want to be friends with our kids. So we want to be careful of what we're sharing. They don't need to know everything about us, just like we don't need to know everything about them. I promise you don't want to know everything about them.
Maureen, do you want to say something?
No, I was just saying that if that could be the last question. I wanted to sort of forewarn everyone, so, because we're at time now.
Oh,
so
thank you.
Hopefully you guys can have an honest conversation without me
Quickly, like, have you guys ever gotten all these sexually provocative messages on your AT&T account on your cell phone? Like, what if the kids click on that, then the other side gets that, or they make a mistake?
I haven't gotten those.
Erasing them, what do you suppose? I don't want them reading things like this.
Yeah. No, and
That's what I think.
that's what I thought of too, Jeff, when you were saying, have you ever gotten something on your phone you didn't ask for? How many spam texts do you all get every day, right?
Countries you can see in the email, or everyone's trying to deceive us with emails saying you won this, you did this. I mean, the whole world's corrupt with all this going
And I
on.
think I do want to give the kids credit. A lot of them have been pretty savvy with that, where they'll know like, oh, this is spam, this is phishing, like they're trying to get my credit card, they're going to try to extort. Like they're pretty good with that because they get a lot of lessons on like how do I filter between like what's spam, what isn't. And they're still, if they want to seek out explicit content, they will, right? It's very Googleable to try to find what they're looking for. I think where my concern lies and what Jeff and I are encouraging you all to talk with your kids about is how do I protect myself, right? When someone's asking me for explicit content, how do I say no to that? How do I alert an adult if I need to, right? There's a difference between someone that you're dating in real life that you've been, seeing for 6 months, asking for a picture versus a person that I met exclusively online asking for a picture within 20 minutes of meeting me, right? Like how do and a lot of kids don't have those skills for like saying no and advocating for themselves. So again, this is where I think we can be helpful with modeling that and asking them like the uncomfortable question, right? Of, hey, if someone asked you to do something that you didn't want to do, how would you say no? What if it was a friend? What if it was someone you really, really liked? What if it was someone you wanted to impress? It feels so clunky and so cheesy, and they may or may not use it. And she was here, but her point, they might not use it right now, but we're laying the groundwork for them to use it later when, again, it counts even more. I'm, again, speaking super generally, but high school is where I want them to make the mistakes. I would much rather them make a mistake now when they're largely at home. They have the support of school. They have the support of this great community. Like there might be consequences. The consequences are probably going to be far less severe and expensive than if they make it now versus making it away at college, right? So like this is where we want them to make the mistakes.
There's a question back there.
Oh, I'll be quick. Just on a somewhat positive note, can you just describe what a healthy relationship looks like? Because I feel like I know what it should look like, and I feel like anytime like a boy comes over, my husband thinks he gets out of the car, rings the doorbell, introduces himself. But my girls are like, I don't know, just like a mini hangout or something like that. And are you seeing it? Because I think COVID has changed quite a bit, and we are in a state of resetting. But what's healthy, and is it there? Because I think there's been a lot of time, appropriately so, spent on, like, predators and that sort of thing. But what's the healthy side?
Yes, and the time was spent here because that's what was asked for. But I agree with you. Yes, let's talk about the healthy stuff too. And I know in the health classrooms, right, Bill, there's a lot of curriculum on healthy and unhealthy relationships. He's saying yes. But what I tend to tell my kids, I even have like, there's a lot of good information on healthy versus unhealthy relationships. I also talk to kids about like, what are you seeing in media? So again, I'll use Euphoria as an example. One of the groups I run is in Darien. It's like their version of Young Philanthropists. So one of their favorite things to do is after an episode of Euphoria airs, they'll be like, Kate, is this real? What was that? And I'll ask them the same thing, like, what do you think about that relationship? Like, what about Rue and Jules? That feels a little like weird and like there aren't great boundaries, like what's going on? And sometimes they can surprise me with what do they already identify as unhealthy, unhelpful, and healthy. But I would talk to your kids too about, what are some red flag things? I think about controlling. Are they expected to be in touch with that partner 24/7? Do they need to be sharing their location with that partner? Those are things that we want to identify as like, that's actually not healthy. What is healthy, right, is you being your own independent person and spending time with friends and having good balance. Again, these are things that they don't inherently know. So sometimes part of the way that they figure out what's healthy, unhealthy is by experiencing something that doesn't feel good or doesn't feel like something they want in a relationship, and then having an opportunity to course correct by either advocating for themselves or being in a different relationship. Did that help answer the
I like your husband. I'm old school too. I like that.
Cool.
Just to add, so if you guys take the self-correct part on the back, there is what a healthy relationship looks like, and these are
Beautiful.
talking points for you and your kids. So it's a good subject to.
Good thinking, Maureen.
Yes, exactly. So please take that home and see.
Thanks, everyone.
Someone who missed it, you might want to issue them. And also you can leave it out. I left it out for my daughter.
And I apologize, everyone. I do need to hop back to the hospital, but I'm going to leave business cards out on the table. So if anyone has follow-up questions, you're more than welcome to give me a call. Normally I try to stick around for a little bit, but I know I can't today, so we don't have an office manager right now. So it's me. Thanks, everyone.